Hello friends, welcome if you're new here, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Elise, and this is my mystical bookshelf. And today I have for you the Saturday Night Ghost Club. This is another audiobook I listened to in August. So I listened to it a while ago, but I didn't think of making a video for it until recently, because I was like trying to think of all the books I read and thinking about what haven't I covered yet. And I'm like, well, I haven't covered that one, and I really like that one. Why haven't I talked about it? So now I'm going to give you my thoughts on the Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson, and it was read to me by Cory Brill, and oh my gosh, it was such a good book. I heard about it from Lexi, who is a famous booktuber in the book world, and I thought it sounded great, and I thought that if she liked it, I would probably like it, because I feel like Lexi and I have very similar book tastes. And so I read it, and it wasn't very long to listen to. It's only a 5-hour and 41-minute book, so it's kind of like the length of a cozy mystery, which is what I've noticed with those types of books, are shorter. But this one is not lighthearted by any means. It is actually really sad, and I don't recommend it if you don't like reading sad books and you don't want to cry, because it definitely made me cry. And I also don't recommend this video if you haven't read it yet, because it's a very big spoilery video. I feel like most of my videos are spoiler-esque. So if you have not read any of the books I've talked about in previous videos, please read them before you watch them, or else you will be spoiled. And that might make you not happy. But if you don't mind being spoiled, then go right ahead and listen to every video that I have, because I go through the books very in depth and I give you my thoughts on them. But this book, it follows our narrator, and what is his name? It says his name is Jake Baker. We follow Jake Baker as he moves to a different part of I don't know if he moved necessarily, but it says he grows up in 1980s Niagara Falls, so he lives there. So I never knew where he lived. I just saw that. I was like, oh, okay. But I don't think that's really integral to the story. This book is very nostalgic, first of all. It's very like, he's reminiscing on his childhood. So the story starts off with Jake talking to us, and he's talking about, he's basically like narrating his life, which I thought was interesting. And this book, I think, is best listened to as an audiobook, because I think one of Lexi's complaints, and this is probably something I would have complained about too, is that the book starts off really slow, which I totally agree with her. It does start off slow, but it made it less slow listening to someone reading it to me than myself reading it to myself. Because if I was reading it like a physical book, I probably would have gotten bored. But like listening to Cory Brill talk to me and like read it to me, it wasn't boring. It was actually really nicely paced, and it's definitely one of those books that's better as an audiobook, I think, because it's slow for sure. It almost feels like when you're listening to it, it's like you're having coffee with Jake. Like you're sitting with him and he's telling you about like his adventures he had as a child. And Jake he's a brain surgeon, so he kind of talks about that too. And I thought that part was super interesting, because he talks about like what he knows as a brain surgeon and what he like learned throughout life. And he's basically reminiscing about like simpler times in his childhood. And it was really great descriptions, like the way where he grew up, it sounded beautiful. And he really did a great job of describing like different places that he went and different people that he met. and the characters were very colorful in this book. And it's basically about Jake finding himself. It's kind of like a coming of age story, but it's being told from the perspective of Jake as an adult, like reminiscing as a child, like him as a child, which I thought was very sweet. And it was super heartwarming, even though it was really sad. And it's called the Saturday Night Ghost Club because his Uncle Cal is like obsessed with ghost stories and like different oddities in the world. And his Uncle Cal, it's hard because this is where the big spoiler comes in for this book especially, is his Uncle Cal had lost his wife at a very young age, and I think it really traumatized him, and it made it so that he became a much different person than who he was when he was first married to his wife, because Jake reveals to us that his Uncle Cal used to be really like straight-laced. He didn't believe in magic, he didn't believe in ghost stories, he didn't believe in any of those things. But I think it was revealed from Jake that his wife, Cal's wife, had believed in all those things. So I think Jake chalked it up to that Cal was trying to keep his wife's memory alive unconsciously by inheriting some of her beliefs. And because Cal is a very eccentric person, and I think there was some sort of brain damage that he endured. Like, I can't remember exactly, but I think he was unconscious for a long time, and he lost some oxygen to his brain, and it changed something in him. And it's very interesting to hear Jake go through that because he is a brain surgeon, so he's kind of like telling us, the reader, like all these things that go on with the brain when you lack oxygen. And he talks about different parts of the brain that hold memories and different parts that hold your personality. And it was very interesting to learn the anatomy of everything that goes into your memory and stuff like that, because Cal's memory of his previous self is basically gone. Like, he doesn't remember anything. And he doesn't even remember his wife, which I thought was really sad. That was the part that kind of made me cry. Was like Cal is like trying to protect himself unconsciously by not remembering his wife, but like inhabiting certain parts of his wife without him even knowing, which I thought was very interesting. And it's kind of like this book basically goes through how Jake grew up, and like how his uncle had impacted his childhood, and how this had impacted his childhood, because Jake never knew anything about it until the very end of the story when he was a little bit older. And he's like, I think he's recollecting on how it affected him, like not knowing about his Uncle Cal's condition until the very end. And it seemed like it was a kind of story where it's like you'd want to cherish your loved ones. You want to cherish your time with them, and you want to cherish all the memories you've made. And I just think that's the saddest part, is that Cal didn't remember his wife, but he kind of kept her essence, essentially. And I think Jake is just going through that because he is reflecting on how it impacted him as a child. And he meets all these nice people, and he becomes friends with these kids next door who become his best friends, basically. And he falls in love with it's a brother and a sister who he befriends, and he becomes best friends with the boy. His name is Billy, and he also meets his sister, and I can't remember the sister's name, but he basically falls in love with her, and he's recounting how, like, this is his first time that he has felt this way about another girl, or about anyone for that matter. And it's just very sweet the way he recalls, like, his feelings for this girl, and how he recalls how he felt when he wanted, like, he had the impulse to kiss her, I think, and stuff like that. It was just really cute seeing him recollect on all these things that impacted him as a child, and how it made him a better person as an adult. And because he stays friends with Billy throughout his whole life, And he tells us that he is still friends with Billy at this point in his life as an adult. And I don't think Jake ever reveals how old he is as he's narrating this book, but I think he talks about when he was like a 12-year-old boy. So it's kind of like the reminiscing of a 12-year-old and how that's a very pivotal part of your life and how everything can impact you in some way or another. And I think adult Jake also reveals that he's still close with his Uncle Cal, and that Jake himself has a child now, and I think he's also reminiscing about that. And he, towards the end, it kind of like, how do I say this? Like, Jake stops reminiscing about his childhood, and he tells the reader that he's still close with his Uncle Cal, he's still close with Billy, he's still friends with this girl that he had his first love with, even though he's married now and has a kid. And he talks about how his son is becoming close with his uncle, which would be his son's great uncle, which I thought was sweet. And his Uncle Cal is still kind of the same person that he was when he knew Jake as a little boy, and he's still knows into all this eccentric stuff. And Uncle Cal tells Jake's son all of these stories and all these ghost stories and stuff like that. And I think what this whole reminiscing thing is like Jake being grateful for his Uncle Cal and being grateful that his son has someone to look up to, because his Uncle Cal is a really great person, even though he is very eccentric, and there's nothing wrong with being eccentric. And I think Jake is reminiscing how his Uncle Cal added spice to his life and made his life very eventful and very colorful. And I thought that was a good message, and the most important message, I think, what I took away from it personally was being thankful for your health, being thankful for your mind, being thankful that you have family and that you have memories of your family. And it's just a really heartwarming story overall, and it definitely was one of my favorite reads that I read this year. And like I said, it is a little bit boring, but it's not boring in a bad way to me. It is boring in a comforting way, because like I said, it feels like Jake is having coffee with the reader and he's talking to the reader like the reader is his best friend, and he's reminiscing with you about stuff. And I think that's what I really liked the most about it. And I'm glad that I listened to it on audio, and I'm glad that I didn't actually read it, because I might not have had the same experience if I would have actually read it as a physical book instead of listening to it. Because listening to it is a 5-star read, but reading it, it might not have been a 5-star. It might have been more of a 3-star, which is still a good book in my opinion, but definitely listening to it is what gave it that 5-star quality, because Corey Brill does a great way of expressing Jake and expressing his essence, and he does a great job with different voices for each of the characters and making his Uncle Cal sound like this sweet, eccentric old man, and he really brings great life to all the characters, and I really liked that part. And that's always my favorite about an audiobook, is the narrator bringing their own zest to the story, making it come alive for the reader, basically. And that's always going to be my praise for an audiobook, is the great narrators that make these audiobooks possible. But yeah, that was my thoughts on that book, and I totally recommend it if you like calming stories. It's a very calm story. It's something that you could listen to and it would help you fall asleep. It just feels very warm and fuzzy and nostalgic, but it's also sad. Like I said, it made me cry. It definitely hit home, with Uncle Cal and his condition, and learning about how he didn't remember anything from who he was previously. And I think that's what's sparked Jake to reminisce about it in the first place, is because he's an adult reminiscing. And yeah, I would totally recommend it for sure. It was a 5-star book, definitely, in my opinion. And I thank you guys for watching, and I thank you for all who have subscribed. And if you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And if you could like my videos, that would be great. And I would love it if you guys commented and told me your thoughts. And told, like, have you read this book, is what I'm trying to say. Or what would you recommend that I read next, if you have any recommendations. And please, I just want to chat with you in the comments if you're up to it. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, friends.